Nick, you're awake. It's time. Time to get to work. We know it's hard to stay focused, but we'll help you.
This is a lot. This is a 27-page manual for a case. It really is a lot. Oh, let's see how this goes. I've read this entire book at least 4 times, and there's a lot. There's a lot. There's a lot going on with this case, ladies and gents. Now, we're not using that at all because we're only going to talk about one of the configurations of the technically three configurations of the Lian Li Odyssey X, and that's what we're talking about today. We're going to talk about it in its dynamic configuration only, not the performance configuration, because to be honest, here's the honest truth of this case. The embargo was the 26th of June. We had planned to do a whole thing, and then Lian Li, like a couple days ago, they're just like, hey, we moved the embargo to be 5 days earlier. So this was way further down our filming schedule, so we have to make do. So yeah, that's my excuse for this video. Please enjoy me talking about this case. This is something that we actually had a bit of a look at Computex 2019. So it's been about 2 years in the making and development. Actually, this version we've got here is a prototype. When did this arrive, Claire? March or February?
Quite a while ago.
Right, so we've had this prototype for about 3 to 4 months. It's just been sitting in our storage. We haven't been able to talk about it. Lian Li moved the release date a couple times, which is fine. But yeah, here it is, the Odyssey X, although in its prototype form. That being said, this prototype is full retail packaging, but there's just a few things that are slightly different on the retail, and it's mainly to do with screws and that kind of stuff that they ended up changing on the retail one. But most of what you're seeing in this video is what you will get if you decide to grab this case for yourself. You're probably noticing already there's no panels on the chassis at all. That's because the panels ship separately. Well, they come in the same box, but they're not attached because you can choose whichever way you want to configure it. But the way it does ship is in the dynamic mode, so it is the easiest way to build with this. That said, all the panels on this case attach with these little clips that have those push pins on the panels themselves, and they pop into place. We're going to show you this in a little bit later in the video, but this is just a little bit of a heads up as to why there's physically nothing on the case, because when you pull it out of the box, this is exactly how it looks. The entire inside of this case is completely modular, so you can reorganize this any way you like. The sky's the limit with something like this. With that said, let's talk about motherboard support and what makes this interesting. So as far as motherboards, you can go from ITX all the way up to EEB, which will hang out somewhere here. This also depends on the orientation of the system you're gonna build. So to change the orientation, there's 10 screws in the top of the case. There's 10 screws that connect the whole motherboard tray and the rear IO, as well as these 2 thumb screws. You can remove them and you can actually flip these around to here, and then you rotate the case that way, and then the rear IO comes up this way. And what that does is allows bigger radiators on here, so you can go up to, I think, 420 mil to 140 mils here, 3 120s. You can do the same thing up the front, and also 3 120s across the top. So you've got a lot of expansion and a lot of room for water cooling activities. As far as rear fan mounting, it's like the O11. There is no fan mounting on the rear side here. There's just a vent. This would have been better if the case was a slight bit wider and allowed for that, but I can also see why they didn't do that. The PSU shroud is removable. 2 screws on the back, 1 screw on the front, and I'm doing this blindly. It allows you to remove the PSU shroud for easier installation. So the PSU is mounted from inside the case rather than backloading it like you traditionally would, or from the rear side panel. Inside the case, you've actually got this bracket here, which allows you to mount liquid cooling pump. So if you've got something like a D5 or a DDC pump, you can mount it directly to this. It's got an array of cutouts so you can line up your pump. So if it's a D5 or a DDC or whatever you want, you can mount it to this bottom plate here. There's a whole stack of grommets for cable pass-throughs, so 24-pin power connectors, fans, basically everything that you need to wire up your system can be passed through these grommets. There's additional cutouts here on top of the motherboard and below the motherboard as well for all cable pass-through. Lots of options here for that. On the PSU shroud, there is also an additional grommet too. You've got drive mounts here for 3.5-inch spinning rush drives or 2.5-inch SSDs. There's 3 in total. They can be completely removed with these thumb screws here. Just remove these thumb screws. The brackets slide up, and then you've got these brackets to mount your drives. You can see it's got the little rubber grommets for mounting everything to stop vibration, especially for spinning rush drives. So I feel like they have thought of quite a lot here. There's quite a bit of attention to detail from what I can see so far. There's also these handy little Velcro tie down points. This is for like cable raceways essentially. There's 4 of those in total here. 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, 1 here. Strategically placed for running up like a 24-pin power cable, EPS power cables, and basically everything you need to get your system up and running. The layout of this is quite nice. However, I think there should be more cable tie down points for running things like your drives through here, which allow you to zip tie or cable tie any of your cables to the back of the motherboard tray. It's not like they're skimping for space here. There's plenty to do that. But the other reason why I think they didn't do that is because the grade of the metal they used here, it's very, very thick. So for them to do something like that, they would have had to probably go down the path of just adding extra eyelet points. But yeah, I mean, it can be done. I don't know why they didn't do that. But again, maybe it was to save time and money, but they did have 2 years to really get this case ready. That said, there's one more additional cable tie down point, which makes 5 in total, if I could count properly, which has all of the front panel wiring. USB 3.0 front panel header, audio front panel header, all your lights and switches. So you've got hard disk, power switch, and power light. And we've got a USB Type-C front panel connector as well. On the front panel, you've got your power button, you've got a headphone and a microphone jack. You've got USB Type-C and 2 USB Type-A ports. As I mentioned a bit earlier, this is the top side of the case. Now I've just rotated the case on its front face, and you can see that it's got the 10 screws here that can be removed to remove this bracket to swap around the motherboard tray and whatnot. I thought I would just show you that so you can see what that actually looks like from a different angle. There's also another metal plate that pops onto this panel here if it's in its regular orientation, and you can see these plastic pin clips that allow you to push the panel on and clip them in. We're gonna put all the panels on so you can see what it looks like in its dynamic mode, so never fear, we got you. Again, with performance mode, we're not gonna be covering this in this video because we'll be doing another build with this system in performance mode, which will make a lot more sense later down the line. But I didn't want this video to go for like half an hour or 40 minutes, so we need to condense as much as we can in this small amount of time. The feet can also be removed in this case. The case is still on the side so I could film this a little bit easier, but it's got these screws here which can be undone, which allows you to rotate the orientation of this for putting the feet the other way around. The case ships with 2 of these front panels here, split into 2 halves, quite obviously, because there's 2 of them. And as I've already mentioned, much like Lian Li's other cases, they use these little pin push things to clip the panels in. I'm going to show you how every single panel connects to this case as well. The front panels are really easy to attach. There's no wrong way to do it. So you can either have it oriented this way, or you can flip it over and even clip it in this way. Again, no wrong way to do this. We're gonna do it this way just because something a little bit different, and you just quite simply push it and it clips on. And if you need to remove it, you can just yank it off and pull them out. But yeah, we'll clip that one on that way. You can even do, like, even if you really wanted to, you could put them both the same way to do something kind of wild, or you can, yeah. I think that's cool. Like, you can basically put it any way you like, but we're gonna be putting it like that. All right, so that's how the front panel mounts, just pops on. The top panel's slightly different. It's got much larger pins, and there's 3 on each side. And the top panel, quite literally, lines up with those bits on the top and pops in just like that. And lastly, the side panel, same story as well. Also has those pins. You can see them in each of the corners. There are 8 in total, and same deal. They just line up with those pins. They pop on. Come on, mate, pop on. Pop on. And Bob's your uncle. However, there is one additional thing you need to be wary of mounting these side panels. You will notice there are these little eyelets cut out in the panel, and this actually allows you to screw them in with thumb screws as well. So if you're never removing the side panel, or you don't want to have that fear of the side panel coming off for some reason, I would recommend putting in the thumb screws for the side panel. And lastly, the rear panel is the same deal as the front panel. Pop, pop. Now you're probably noticing this line here. You're like, what is that line for? I'm gonna show you this. This doesn't relate to this orientation. This relates to the performance orientation. In the other orientation, the panel actually will sit like this to allow extra airflow through the side panel. And yeah, it also makes the case much wider too. You'll see the additional slit for airflow through the side of the panel, and actually stops. It doesn't go further than that at all. And then you just snap it back into place to use it for the dynamic orientation. So very, very modular design with the Lian Li Odyssey X. There's lots of included accessories here, plenty of screws and everything to mount basically anything in any orientation in this case. And there's also additional clips as well. There's also a set of these 4 brackets that allow you to mount the panel being split open like I showed earlier. And this is for that performance layout. It's got the clips built in. These are very, very lightweight. And as I mentioned, yeah, there's another 3 in the box here. Lastly, there's a grill that is for when you're changing the orientation of the case for additional fan mounting. You can see the slits cut out here for fans. All in all, with the Odyssey X, this is one of the most modular cases that I've ever seen. But is this thing any good? Let's do a build and find out, and then yeah, I'll let you guys know how I feel about this thing after actually assembling a system and seeing if it's something that is worth your hard-earned money. So let's do a build and do some science. Something mid-build. This is ridiculous. This case is absolutely huge, but look at this, right? You're gonna have a bit of a laugh. Ready? This case is huge. The radiator doesn't even fit at the top. Lian Li's done it again. This doesn't make sense at all. Why is this case so big and the radiator can't fit at the top? ladies and gents, I hope you enjoyed this build in the Lian Li Odyssey X in dynamic mode. But let's quickly take a look at the thermals. What you're seeing on screen right now is that in the configuration that we've got here with the fans blowing this way with it exhausting out the backside, the performance thermally is much better than if we have the fans intaking through the radiator. So I would recommend doing it this way, and overall the thermals for this case aren't actually too bad. However, that's mainly to do with the volume of this case. This thing is really, really big, so big cases tend to have fairly good thermals because there is more area for the air to move around. And yeah, this case is actually quite open for what it is as well, despite those front panels. Yeah, not a huge temperature difference between having everything on and everything off. All right, let's quickly chat about the parts. The motherboard is the ASUS ROG Crosshair 8 Dark Hero. It's an X570 board. The CPU is the AMD Ryzen 9 5900X. To cool the 5900X, we use the Lian Li GALAHAD 360 AIO. It's an all-in-one liquid cooler. For RAM, we're using 16 gigs of V-Color Prism Pro with a little Gear Seekers logo on it. I thought that was a nice little touch. The GPU is the ASUS TUF Gaming RTX 3070 Ti. And all of the fans in the system are Lian Li SL120 Uni fans plugged directly into the motherboard, so I didn't have to use the L-Connect hub to do any of the lighting configuration. I find it easier to be this way, that way I don't have to install as much software. I can just plug it in and away you go, and Bob's your uncle. And obviously the case, it's the Lian Li Odyssey X. But let's chat about this thing and a couple things that I found with this case. So you probably saw mid-build that my original plan was to put a 360mm AIO up the top, and it doesn't fit in this dynamic configuration at least. I'm really confused, and the reason why I'm confused is this case is huge. How does a 360mm AIO not fit at the top? This is not the first time Lian Li has done this in the last few years with their larger cases. This doesn't make sense to me. Why can't I put a 360mm AIO at the top of this case? And it's not even the motherboard with huge heat sinks for the VRM cooling. This wouldn't fit with any motherboard. It just doesn't make sense to me. And it's a little bit frustrating because look at me compared to the size of this thing. This thing's huge. That's my main issue with the case is you can't put a radiator at the top in its stock configuration. It just doesn't make sense. 2 years to develop this and they couldn't get that right. So that doesn't make sense. I'm sorry, I have to pick on these things because it just doesn't make sense to me. Another thing I noticed with this case was when I was like setting it up and like only putting one side panel on the case is weighted really oddly. So be aware of the weight shift if you're pulling a side panel off, because look, I'm not even pushing that hard and this thing will easily tip over, right? So just be super aware of the weight shift. Look, that's no force at all. There's not many cases where you can just do that and it will tip with no force at all. So be very, very careful with if you're putting this PC down or you're cleaning it or you're doing something like that. Yeah, that is quite unbalanced. But again, with the side panel on, it does balance the system out. But you know, if you need to do something really quickly, just don't push on the case. Otherwise it will tip over with the other glass panel on the other side. So I even think that the feet have started to bend because I've been doing that much. But that aside, the Odyssey X is actually pretty nice to build in. It's very easy, very modular. I had no issues other than that radiator placement at the top. I put it on the side to side mounted. It's like a Lian Li thing. And actually back in 2019, I predicted that in 2019 and onwards, we would see these side-mounted radiators become more of a thing, and it looks like everybody's doing it now, so I was right. The build quality of this case is exceptional. The whole case seems to be aluminium or aluminum if you're in America. It's pronounced aluminium, guys, just calm down. It's not magnetic at all, so some of the magnetic stuff I was going to use on this case obviously doesn't work because of the type of metal, but that's fine. That's just a little bit of an observation for those people who are thinking of using magnetized things on this case. It's not going to work. The finish of the case, even though this is a prototype, mind you, The retail one is basically the same other than a couple screws. It is really, really good. They've done a really good job. The only thing I noticed with this, and this is becoming more of a trend, these black cases with the paint finish are just becoming more and more fingerprint magnets. I can wash my hands 20 times while building a PC. It's just still gonna get these fingerprints on all the black finishing on the cases. So just be aware of that. Maybe wear some gloves if you're building with this. I don't like wearing gloves. It doesn't feel as tactile to me when I build, so that's why I never wear them. I see other YouTubers wearing gloves, but that's weird. It just feels weird. Don't do that. With all of the little things aside, like the paint and the top radiator mounting and the finish being really good, the case is quite solid. I will come back and do a water-cooled build in the performance layout. I didn't want to dive into that in this video. I just wanted to build with it, see what it was like in this configuration, and really, yeah, just see how we go, because like I mentioned at the start of the video, which was yesterday, because this video took 2 days to make, the embargo changed, so we actually ran out of time and scheduling and all of that stuff that happens when you run a YouTube channel. The biggest concern I have about this case though is not the finish, not the top radiator mounting, but the price. The price is $499 US, so $500 US, and you can't mount a radiator at the top in the stock configuration. That's a bit, that's a bit of a hard one to swallow for me personally. That's a lot of money. That is a lot of money for a case like this, but I get it because the build quality is quite similar to the Cooler Master Cosmos C700M. Like, there's a lot of similarities in size as well. The finish of both of those cases is similar to this as well. So I think this case is really geared towards enthusiasts who want to have a lot of options, but $500 is a hard pill to swallow for any case in 2021, given the already dwindling supply of all hardware and everything in the market. Yeah, this one is gonna be, quite a hard one for people to swallow. However, if you, like I mentioned, if you're an enthusiast who wants like a showcase build, or you want a high performance build in performance mode, and you don't care about burning your own money, which is not necessarily a bad thing, yeah, this case is okay. But personally, not really my cup of tea. The benefit of the Lian Li Odyssey X is you're probably going to be able to buy this case, and it's going to be easier to get than a Dune Pro. Yep, I've been following that. I'm there watching it happen every day in their Discord. I don't know what's going on with Dune and that Indiegogo, but that's not how you launch a case. Started shipping on the 31st of May.
I enjoy reading fairy tales before I go to sleep as well.
Anyways, guys. Yeah, let us know what you guys think of the Odyssey X. This is, I think, launching like now. I'm not sure. I think they're announcing it now. Well, they did announce it already at Computex in 2019. Well, they showed it on the show floor in its super prototype state, but I think it's launching now from... yeah. Anyways, guys, if you like the music you heard here, I make all the music. It's available on Patreon. I'll put a PC part picker list down below in the description so you can see all of the hardware that I used. Again, I'm not really sold on the Odyssey X. It's really big, and you know, I don't like really big cases. I had a bit more hope for this, given that I thought I could probably put a radiator at the top. I'm going to keep banging on about it because Lian Li needs to listen to this. It doesn't make sense. Don't make big cases if you can't put a radiator at the top. You're alienating a whole bunch of water cooling people. Kind of put me off, because I was actually going to build a custom loop in this initially, and I would have wanted to put a radiator at the top, and it would have just been an absolute mess and a nightmare, and I would have been even angrier if I was halfway through building a custom loop and it didn't fit. So, and I know that like it says that it should fit, but it doesn't. So yeah, what are we doing now? Cinematic mode, right?
Yeah, do it.
Cinematic mode? We'll save the peel for another day.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for watching.